Greetings from the past. I am traveling through time from the distant year of 2022. In fact, it is November 13th, 2022. And in this box, I have got a new mug that I am about to drive to Disneyland. I am so excited about it. I can't wait to show you how I made it. In fact, we're gonna travel even farther back in time to see how I put this thing together. I don't want to show it to you now. I don't do any spoilers. Spoilers! I'm so excited about this. I am so glad I had the forethought to record this transmission from the past. And I just wonder what your future is like. Does YouTube even exist? Do I have any hair left? This is being filmed on my brand new iPhone 14. Are we on the iPhone 20 by the time you see this? Only time will tell, quite literally. Anyway, let's roll back the clock and see how I made this thing. Which brings us here to the most expensive jump cut in Tiki Technical Tuesday history. Yes, that is the Matterhorn behind me. It is a thing that I've loved since my first childhood visit, but I'm not here to talk about the Matterhorn. I'm here to talk about this, the little thing that you see at the base of the Matterhorn. And let me tell you folks, I have been wanting to make a mug out of this for years. I'm talking over a decade. It has been a fantasy of mine. It is this beautiful little thing that you see at the base of the Matterhorn. It grabbed my childhood heart. It is like a little piece of like archaeological history that adds so much credence to the ride. Yeah, this is what I knew had to be a mug. If I ever got a shot at making an official mug for Disney, this is the one that I'd wanted to make. In 2021, I got that shot. I was asked to go to Club 33, a secret members-only club inside of Disneyland, and pitch some ideas for mugs. Now, I dusted off the dream mug idea I had, knowing that in 2024, it would be the 65th anniversary of the Matterhorn ride. I presented these concept sketches showing a reproduction of the famous Yeti footprint, and inside of that you would have this mountain, this kind of miniature Matterhorn mountain of crushed ice and adult beverage. You could even put a little ice pick swizzle. I really hope they make the ice pick swizzle, and it can hang on the wall when you're not drinking out of it. Lastly, I envisioned a bonus surprise. On the bottom of the mug, in a high relief, you'd actually see the abominable snowman that you pass by in the Matterhorn ride. I thought it'd just be a really nice secret touch that people wouldn't know was there until they picked up the mug and looked on the bottom. Club 33 approved the design, and it was time to start making it. Now, unlike the Small World mug that I designed, where I had just done an illustration, I was actually going to sculpt the master model for this mug in the studio. Now, California has some very strict liquor license or liquor serving, there's a lot of liquor laws. So I had to hit a very specific volume in this sculpture. So I sculpted it like this first to get an idea of what the volume would be. And I put this into water to displace it. And once I thought I had the size right, it was time to make my armatures. I designed all the armatures on my computer, and then Denise cut them all on our laser. These were done in acrylic. Here you can see the laser cutting in actual speed. Here, not quite as exciting as it is when you cut in real time, but it still is crazy fast considering that is, I think, a ½ inch of acrylic. We used a bunch of different thicknesses because I wanted to design this armature in 2 sections. I'm going to have a section to do the relief sculpture and a section to do the footprint sculpture. Here we got the bit for the footprint, and then on the left-hand side, we have got the multiple stacks that are going to make up the ice cave for the relief bottom of the sculpture. And these two were done with the laser because they have got to fit together perfectly after I sculpt them. In addition to the base armature, I made this little kind of handy tool, guide, wedge thing. I don't know. It's going to help me make sure that my angle is uniform while I'm sculpting the sides of the mug. You'll see. Okay, it is time to start sculpting. We're going to be doing this in Monster Clay Gray Medium. It's a wax-based sculpting clay, and I'm using it for the upper section of this mug, the footprint. Now, I built this up on that acrylic template, that acrylic base that we cut, so that I can get the size to match precisely when I do the flip side of this mug, the relief base. And here you can see that little widget, that little edge shaping widget. It's going to help me line up my edges perfectly with that acrylic template. I eventually got into a groove of checking the side angle, adding a little bit more clay, and then setting the piece under a fan for a while so that the clay could firm up and cool off. It's a wax-based clay, so you can't let it get too hot while you're working, or the whole thing will kind of just turn into a flat pancake. Okie dokie, it is the next morning, and we've got things pretty blocked out. It is still rough. This is just a approximation of the shape. We've used the jig, we've got a good angle, we've got the height set up great. Now it's time to kind of dial things in. I'm going to pin this to the top of my armature with some pins. Boop. And I'm going to set up the actual top outer edge of the sculpture. Now, I'm working off of these sketches right here from my initial plan, and it's important to remember that these sketches are kind of a goal and something to shoot for, but they're not the final thing. I'm going to find kind of a balance between what this thing looks like in 3D and what I imagined in my head it would look like when I drew it. So that's kind of the goal for today, is to get the shape pretty much dialed in, and then we can dig out the foot and I can start the very fun part, which is texturing the stone. I followed the paper template with an X-Acto knife blade to transfer the design into the clay so that I would know exactly what I had to scoop out. From there, it was just time to follow that scribe design and pull clay out. I want to give an impression of an abominable snowman's footprint, and also I want to remove enough clay to actually work as a mug or a cup or a bowl. I wanted to make sure that this looked like the footprint that was in the parks, but also, functioned well. And of course, it had to hold the exact amount of fluid. I always feel like this can be boring watching the sculpture take place in time-lapse, but you've all assured me that you like to watch the sculpting time-lapses, so I'm keeping them in here. I'm putting them all in so you can see the entire process. Well, everything that I shot, that is. I did build this extremely advanced tool. It's kind of a sculpting jig made out of a paint stir stick and a tongue depressor, and it helps me to gauge the depth of the well or the bowl or the footprint. Okay, so Disney, as I mentioned earlier, is very specific about volume because of California liquor laws. So I know that this has got to hold exactly 18 ounces, and I did do my rough volume calculation using this in water, as you saw earlier. I think if I could find the old footage. At any rate, so I've got a ballpark. I've got a ballpark that I'm shooting for, but I still am checking it. So as I take clay away, I will take 18 ounces of water just to check where we're at. That's pretty good. So we're down to that's like 12 ounces of water in there, and I haven't gone all the way to the brim. Could probably put a little more in there. All right, so that's like 13 ounces. So I've still got to take a little bit out. Now, 18 ounces is the big size. This is going to shrink 12 point something percent, so we're calculating for the large size. I get the water back out. The great thing about the monster clay being wax-based is the water doesn't hurt the clay at all, and I can totally check my volumes without any worry about damaging the sculpture. So that's the way that I went for the rest of the afternoon. I would round out the bottom of the foot, take away clay, smooth things out, and then just double check my volume measurements by filling it up with water again and making sure everything was okay. This part of sculpting is just basically moving from rougher tools down to finer tools and down to finer tools. So you can see I started with a very rough hook rake, and now I'm moving to a very small detailed rake, and I'll just continue to do that to refine all the planes and surfaces of this footprint. Here I'm using a rake that's actually made out of a guitar string. It's a nice kind of serrated tool, just to get all these tiny little itty-bitty nuanced bits. It's crazy how the more you get down to like the nitty-gritty detailed parts of the sculpture, it just takes longer and longer and longer, and you can kind of get lost in these details if you're not careful. By that, I mean you want to make sure that you're evening out the work that you're doing. So once I got the inside of the footprint done to a point where I felt it was good, I wanted to make sure I started working on the outside, the stony, rocky texture. It's easy to fall into the trap of putting tons of detail into one part of a sculpture while completely forgetting about the other parts of the sculpture, and the whole thing can get out of whack. So I try to move everything along at the same pace, so everything is kind of at the same level of detail. Okay, so this is getting a little tricky, and it's something that I've always got to consider with client mugs. There's two things that I'm trying to keep in mind. One, I have kind of committed to this design. I have submitted this design to a client, and so this is what they're expecting, and I can't deviate from it too strongly. Now, if this is my own mug, while I'm sculpting it, I could be like, you know what, I think this would look cooler, or I think that would look cooler, and that's fine because I am the client. But this is for somebody else, and this is for a big somebody, as you know. So I can't just go willy-nilly. This is what I presented, so this is what I am doing. So I'm carefully lining up the cracks that I drew and making sure it works. Now, if I think they should change slightly, I definitely will, but that is factor one, is I've got to try to lock into our concepts. Now, I am always very careful when I'm doing my concepts. I never submit a concept I don't like, and I try to really work out all of the issues that I think I might have on paper first. Issue number two is the actual prop artifact that I am paying homage to in this case. And I'm trying to strike a balance between a complete reproduction of the existing piece and my own artistic interpretation. This is not only a Disney mug, but it's a Van Tiki mug, so I want to make sure that my feel is in there. So the stonework and cracks are stylistic. They are the way that I would interpret them. I'm trying to keep the footprint as accurate as possible, but I'm still giving it a little bit of my own je ne sais quoi, if you will. So that's kind of what I'm balancing now as I am adding detail and tightening things up. Doing all this detail work and tightening is what really made the mug come together, and this is where I was really having fun on the whole piece. It just looks cool. The second I started making it really look like that, chunk of stone, it just really started to sing to me. Anyway, we got to a point where I thought that we were nearly done, and I took a bunch of photos to send over to Disney to see what they thought. If you're wondering what that strange notch is in the middle of the bottom of the mug, that's so you can pick it up. Disney realized right away when I sent them the initial drawings that it would be difficult to pick this up off of a table without putting your thumb into the drink unless there was like a notch to help you pick the mug up. Okay, so I got the top section of the mug just about done. I have sent it off to Disney to see if they've got any changes, any concerns, any things I should worry about. While they're mulling that over, I'm gonna hop on to the bottom kind of surprise reveal that we're putting in the base of the mug. So I've got all of these sheets of acrylic that we cut when we were building the armatures. And what I wanna do is I wanna start beveling these edges, rounding them out, and kind of making them look a little more like icicles, if you will. And then once that's all dialed together, we will laminate these together with epoxy and start sculpting. So you can see I'm using lots and lots of different layers of acrylic to do this base relief sculpture. And the reason is I have to be really careful about not sculpting too far back because I'm going to hit the bottom of the footprint that's above this thing. So I'm allowing myself about a 1/2 inch thickness for the sculpture part, and then I'm doing a couple of much thinner layers of acrylic to build kind of the foreground stalactites and stalactites made out of ice tights, ice stalag ice. I don't know what they're called. The ice cave diorama, if you will. So I've just got to be very cautious when I set all this up so that I don't sculpt too deeply, like I said, and run into the foot that's going to go on the other side of this thing. All right, it's the next morning. The epoxy has completely set. I am actually going to take a little bit of gray primer to this to kind of even out the color. This will match the clay color that I'm using, and it'll make it easier for me to see what's going on while I sculpt. Let's go do it. There is nothing more satisfying than getting primer onto something that you're working on. All right, so here we go. We've got a nice, beautiful gray, and this matches the clay perfectly. In addition to priming the armature sculpture stand, I also made this little angled holder that will hold the armature in place to just make it a lot easier for me to sculpt and design this thing. Now, once this was all done, it was time to transfer the design to the armature. So I carefully cut out the abominable snowman that I want to put in there and placed it within the armature. And then I painstakingly cut layer after layer away and penned it in with a little Sharpie to give me some guidelines to follow when I start laying clay into this. Okay, so here's what's going on. I'm using this like rolling pin made out of PVC pipe and this handy dandy little tabletop that I set up, which is exactly 1 millimeter thick. I then roll out all of these little slabs of the monster clay. We are using the monster clay hard for this section of the sculpture. I then put it down like this, and I'm gonna carefully cut out and piece in all of these little sections inside of here. I want to be very careful in the way that I build up thickness on this sculpture. I am doing a relief here. I only have a little bit of space to play with, so I've got to layer that clay on very carefully. Earlier, I mentioned the danger of pushing this relief too far back and having it hit the bottom of the foot that is actually like the top of the mug. You have to remember this is the bottom side of the mug. The other danger that I have as I build up these layers of clay is making it too thick the other direction so that the nose of the abominable snowman would touch the bottom of the table that you're working on. I don't want that at all. I want there to be a nice gap between the face of the abominable snowman and the ridge, the borderline edge of the mug base, so that we can glaze the abominable snowman and it will not actually touch the bottom of the kiln when it's firing or the table when you're using this mug. It's eyeball time, and I would like to have a firm sphere in there for the eyeball. It helps me when I'm setting up like the ridges around the eye. It's hard to make a clay eyeball and then not mess it up by bumping it when you're sculpting all the stuff around it. So I went to Eugene Toy and Hobby, possibly the greatest toy store on earth, and got some marbles in various sizes. Now I think that these are going to work the best. They are shooters, which I think is a 15 millimeter marble. Now the downside is this marble will sit too high. It's a good size, but it's gonna sit too high. It's gonna hit the wood back here. And I actually went to the hardware store to try to find like a nylon sphere that I could sand down, but then I was like, oh my God, we've got the crazy diamond sanding wheel that we use for bottoms of mugs, which sand away glaze, and glaze is made out of glass, which is what marbles are made out of. So I'm gonna try to sand the back of these down so I can set them in. If that doesn't work, I really don't wanna have to drill out this wood. So let's just hope that works. Okay, Mrs. Van Tiki usually operates this device. I hope I don't break it. It's definitely sanding them down. So what we're looking at here is a little potter's wheel, and on top of that wheel we have a bat that is made out of a diamond sanding material. So this is a special sanding disc on top of it. As you can see, it makes short work of the glass marbles. And look at that, they sit in here perfectly. I should also note that I did also sand away the tip of one of my fingers, holding the marble down against the spinning disc for so long. I didn't realize I was also sanding my fingertips, so if you're going to try doing this at home or in your own studio, wear gloves or just make sure your finger does not come in contact with that spinning sanding disc. So, true Matterhorn story. I first went to Disneyland. I grew up in Hawaii, and we took a family trip to Disneyland. I think I was like in 5th grade maybe. And I absolutely loved the Matterhorn. I think that we went on it several times on that trip, but the Yeti scared the daylights out of me. The abominable snowman, I saw it in the first pass, but then I kept my eyes closed every other time I went on that ride. And that continued well into adulthood. It just terrified me. So I would just close my eyes as we would go by the monster, and only recently did I start opening my eyes again. But then they did the change. They added the extra stuff to the beginning of the ride, and it scares the daylights out of me. I still get very scared every time I go by the snowman. Okay, this is it, the home stretch. Hopefully the sound of the fountain outside isn't too crazy. We've been having some ridiculous smoke from forest fires lately, and I'm trying to air out the studio because the air is thankfully clean at this moment. Anyway, this is the last night of sculpting. I'm hoping to get this 95% complete tonight so I can send photos off for approval and discussion from the higher ups. This is exciting. This is the most intense relief sculpture I've ever done. I have not really sculpted in relief extensively in a long time, well, ever actually. So I've been having a little bit of anxiety about this and also a lot of excitement about this. It's fun to come up with an idea, commit to doing it, and then challenge yourself in pulling it off. And there is a magic in pulling something out of your head and out of reference and actually getting it into clay. And this is turning out just like I hoped it would. Now I've got a lot to tighten up, and then there's gonna be other steps, but let's just dive into it. The night is young and I don't have that much time to finish this thing up. I'm rambling. Am I procrastinating? I don't know. Let's just start the time lapse. So just like when we were sculpting the top section, the footprint section, we are working from rough sculpture to fine detailed sculpture. I'm taking rough sculpting tools and then moving to like a medium sculpting tool and then a fine tool, and then I'll go into the sponges and brushes to work and smooth that surface and get everything looking great. I want to make sure I do this uniformly over the whole sculpture. I don't want to detail one section while not detailing another section. And it's kind of tricky with this relief because this is a very thin section of clay. I quickly learned, just like when you're working in tiny detailed pieces, a tiny dot of clay can make a big difference on the way that the piece looks. All right, well, Disney has approved both the bottom relief sculpture and the top footprint sculpture, so it's my job to stick these together into one master model. And I'd like this master model to be very sturdy, strong, and lightweight so that I can deliver it to Disney without it getting bumped or messed up, and they can ship it overseas for mass manufacture. The first thing we need to do is make some molds. I'm going to make a silicone mold of the bottom relief sculpture and of the footprint sculpture. This is the same silicone that I use for doing my master models when I'm slip casting. I believe it is a, it's a Rebound 40 from Smooth On. It's a great silicone rubber. You don't have to use this to make your molds. It's just what I have in the studio and what I'm kind of really used to working with. We got a great casting here. Well, a great mold, I should say. It's a great silicone casting. And I went ahead and did the exact same thing with the foot section. Okie dokie, I am about to do something that I have never done, and that is cast these in a super thin epoxy. So we sculpted them in clay. The monster clay was great, but it's not that firm. I want a very strong model that I can give to the client that will not get damaged in shipping or will not get nicked or bumped. And this is also something that I can sand and prime and get to look absolutely pristine. It's a much more firm surface, at least that's the plan. Now, I've never done this before, and I am a little freaked out, to say the least. I'm gonna be doing a couple coats of this, what do we got? We have epoxy coat, gray, and then I'm gonna back that up with a layer of freeform air. It is like a foamed epoxy. It's ultra lightweight and very strong. So it's kind of a timing thing. I'm gonna put down a coat of this epoxy. It has like a pot life of 20 minutes or something like that. I'll have to look it up. All I know is like in about an hour, it turns tacky hard. That's the word they have for it, where it's firm, but still a little sticky. At that point, I mix up another batch of it, brush on a second coat. I wait about an hour for that coat to get tacky hard, and then I apply the foam epoxy. So a lot of timing, a lot of careful mixing. It's gonna be nuts. Maybe I'll just set up a time lapse on this. It's tricky to film things, especially when you've never done them before. And I'm gonna be wearing gloves, a respirator, it's epoxy, it's stinky stuff. Why don't you all just cross your fingers for me and let's just hope that this works out okay. Now I should say, I've got time. If today's attempt fails, I will definitely try it again tomorrow. I should have plenty of material for several attempts. Like I said, this stuff is expensive, so I put extra notes on my tabletop so I knew exactly how much time I had to work with it because I don't want to waste any of this material. Here you can see me mixing it. It's by volume, so I'm carefully adding it, mixing it extremely carefully, and then I just brush it on in there. I'm going for a thin coat. It has almost like the feel of like an extra thick acrylic paint. Okay, so it was taking a while to set. It's a little cooler. It's fall, as you know. Time traveler. And so I went for a run, hence my outfit right now. I probably waited a little too long because I think I've passed the tacky hard and just moved on to the getting kind of hard stage. I think it's going to be fine. So I'm going to clear off the table from this stuff and we're going to mix up the freeform air. It is like this. It's like making biscuits out of like a foam that turns to a rock after a while. So I'm gonna mix up part A and part B equal volumes in like little spheres, like little snowballs, mix those two together and pack it in. I'm gonna make a skin on each side of this. I think we're gonna do another time lapse. If you've watched my Game Relics episode where I built the Fireball Island game board, I used freeform air a lot on that project. It's an incredible material. It's a lot of fun to use. It just sticks to everything, so you just got to get used to working with it, and you got to really be careful about the volume that you do, because the more you mix up, the faster it sets. So I like to work in small batches that I add and build up as I need them. Alrighty, it has been 24 hours. It has been very difficult for me to just wait for this epoxy to fully cure, but it has cured. It is nice and firm, and I'm going to try opening these up. It is scary to use new materials. Now, I have gotten these on recommendations of a lot of my special effects friends who use these all the time, and hopefully these are okay. Way back in the day, eons and eons ago, I was a makeup effects artist, and I made lots of molds there. That is, in fact, where I learned how to make molds. And back then, we didn't have these fancy materials. We made everything out of plaster or fiberglass. So molds were extremely heavy. These days, they make them out of this stuff, which is very light. In fact, just before I left, like towards the end of my career, if I think way back, we worked on a movie called Eraser. It's an awful movie. Don't go see it. But we had to make these giant alligators, like 14-foot alligators. Those molds would have weighed an absolute ton, so we brought in a specialist to show us how to use syntactic foam, which is what this stuff is right here. So it's kind of cool to use it again after all these years. It's coming out. Ha! Look at that! That is fantastic. And it weighs nothing, and it's rock hard. Look at those marble eyeballs. There are a couple of pinholes, which I'm gonna have to fill, but all in all, that's good casting. Let's see how the other one turned out. Ha-ha! Oh. Fantastic. Whoa. Oh. Woo! All right, we are going to try this again. Yes, we have one good casting, and it's a really good casting, but I've got enough material to do 2 castings, possibly even 3. So let's take a second cast just to make sure that we can get the best possible casting that we can out of these molds before we start the whole cleanup process. It is Sunday. In fact, it is Halloween, and we are working on the weekend because that is what you do as a small business owner. We don't want to interrupt the casting process for the hornbill mug. So this weekend has been jam-packed with designing the 2022 holiday ornament for Van Tiki and also with this project. So there's a lot going on. Practice makes perfect, and this second round of the epoxy did go way smoother. Whew, okay, I got both coats in, and I got all of the freeform air put in there. It went better this time. I got my timing a little better, so I was able to get the freeform air on while the epoxy was still a little sticky, which made it a lot easier to build up a thinner coat. Was the timing correct? I don't know. We'll see when I open these up. Hopefully I didn't distort or crack that first thin layer of epoxy that I put in. I'm learning. Anyway, this has got to sit for 24 hours, so I will open it tomorrow afternoon. All right, the next day I opened it up and the casting turned out fantastic. So it was time to now clean things up. I went through each of the castings and kind of tooled away any little air bubbles or pockets, and I did some final sanding passes on the pieces to just get the surfaces looking as absolutely good as they possibly could. This is a great time to do it because the epoxy is nice and firm and strong versus the clay, so you can sand it and get a great surface on it. Oh my gosh. Blah. Blah. Okay. Oh, I am covered with epoxy dust. I was outside of the studio grinding down this side and this side so that they would fit together. Doop, doop. Oh, whoa. Like so. Ah, fantastic. Now I want to make this bond permanent. So I'm going to put a bead of the freeform air in here and then mash them together, and that will set up and really bond them. And to do that, I'm going to use the fast version of the freeform air, which sets up in like 5 minutes. It goes really fast because I want to be able to work on this thing tomorrow. So let's go for it. Here you can see me mixing up the freeform air. It's a 2-part putty, so I'm taking a little ball of part A and a ball of part B, and I mix them together and knead them like a little stinky ball of bread dough before placing it onto the mug pieces and just really squishing them together. As you can see, I wanted to get a little extra weight onto the model, so I grabbed one of the hornbill molds, it's empty, and put it up on top. So I'll leave this here overnight. Like I said, this stuff sets really fast. In fact, it's probably starting to set right now, but I'm gonna give it overnight with this weight on it just to make sure nothing warps or changes as everything cures. Greetings, time travelers. It is November 5th, 2022. A cool November day. In fact, it is Saturday, and we are in the final steps of getting this model ready to send off to Disneyland. Now, what are we doing for the final steps? It's just basically about unifying the shape. As you can see, I have joined both of these pieces together. I used a sculptable epoxy. It's a 2-part epoxy called Magic Sculpt. So we will be using that today. And then I have a whole, I just got back from the hardware store. I got a whole plethora of tools. Sandpaper ranging from 80 to 120 to 320. I've got a fine synthetic steel wool and ultra fine actual steel wool. I've got glazing putty to fill tiny little spots in air bubbles, and I've even got some Bondo in case I need to tackle a bigger space. I don't think so. The Bondo is kind of emergency backup. I think that the majority of this will be done with the sculpting epoxy and the glazing putty. That's my hope. Oh, and then final, I'll be doing a couple passes with a surface primer to just get everything nice and uniform. So it's going to be lots of like patch, sand, primer, patch, sand, primer. That's what the plan is for the day. So I will say one of the cool things about doing a project like this is I get to talk to the Disney archives, and I asked if they knew anything about the original, prop that this is based on that you see in the park, that the Bigfoot casting. And they sent over this really cool, I guess it's like a little newspaper, like a newspaper that is only within the park, like that the people that work in the park get to see. And it showed the artist making the foot. And it was for when they refurbished the ride. I'll put the date up. I can't remember off the top of my head. And he sculpted these feet. And it looks like they actually just sculpted a positive of the foot that they then pressed probably into cement or something like that to make the prints. And I guess they were going to put prints all over the place. And I don't know. I don't know how many they ended up making, but it was so weird to see the Imagineer sculpting this exact foot. And I wonder if he, like me, was like, can I just get a little more time? Maybe I'll just make this a little more perfect. Of course, the mantra done is best comes into play now. This is looking super good. And like I said earlier, I really need to get a coat of primer on this thing and call it finished. Okie dokie, I have got lots of sanding. I put on lots of epoxy and I've done lots more sanding. And things are looking pretty good. Now I have a final little bead of epoxy in here. I'm using the same Magic Sculpt here to fill in any perceived undercuts or little things that I want to fix. I'm going to let this set overnight, and then I will do another coat of primer and do another sanding round. I'm alternating between 2 different types of primer, so I have a dark primer and a light primer. It kind of helps me keep track of where I am when I'm painting it. But yeah, things are going well. It's just hard because you have to like do a little and then let it sit and then do a little more. But it's cool. It's looking like a unified final thing that's actually going to happen. And I got to tell you, it's really weird to work on this and think that it's going to be going somewhere else, that I'm not actually going to be casting it. That's weird. That's weird, number one. Weird, number two, is that it's going to Disneyland. I mean, it freaks me out to think about it. Yeah, it's very weird. I almost try to not think about it because it's almost too much to think about, and I frighten myself, or I get a little bit of anxiety about like, oh my God, this is for Disneyland. I mean, it's a project I've wanted to do forever. Anyway, I will be back tomorrow to do some more sanding. Okay, time travelers, it is November 11th, 2022, and I have been putting multiple coats of primer, and then I've been sanding, and I've been filling in little pockets, and I think we're getting to the point where I am going insane, and I need to wrap this thing up. So we're going to call this done after one final light dusting of primer and a final ultra polished with some extra fine steel wool. And then we're putting it in a box and we're taking it to Disneyland. It is so weird to work on this and then I'm gonna be giving it away and then waiting. I'm gonna be waiting a long time. I don't know when you're gonna be watching this, but it's gonna be over a year from now. Maybe all of my hair will be gone by then. Maybe it'll be gray. Who knows? Who knows what the future holds? But it's gonna be weird to send this off and then see it again in the park. And it'll be weird because it'll be much smaller. It's gonna shrink. It's gonna shrink about 12%, which is just gonna be strange. So it'll be odd to have, it'll just be so weird. I don't know. I hope it all works out okay. It's hard to like send it away and let somebody else finish it. It's so hard, but I have the utmost faith in the people that are making this. They have been doing ceramics much longer than I have. Weirdness. Anyway, I'll stop blabbing and I'll get the final coat of primer onto this. Oh, welcome time travelers to the present. Well, I guess it's the past for you, but it's the present now. It is, well, let's just say it is May 31st, 2024, and we are going to be getting on an airplane tomorrow for Disneyland. Am I going to wear this on the airplane? No, I am not, but I will wear it for the special release party that Club 33 is holding for the mug. Why am I excited about that? Well, one, I mean, let's be honest, it's a special release party at Club 33, so I can't believe I'm actually going to get in there. And secondly, it's going to be our first time seeing the mug. We haven't seen it yet. I've only seen some like promo photos of it, which just showed like parts of it. I have not seen the bottom of the mug. I have not touched the mug. I cannot wait to get my hands on this thing. It has been 567 days since we put that thing into a box and took it down there. So needless to say, Denise and I can't wait. We got the special outfits made. I made this little coat of arms. If you go on the Matterhorn ride, there's a coat of arms. You can see them all along the top. And one of them has a little VR on it. So we made a little copy of it for our outfits because our last name is Van Ryzen. Anyway, we are super excited. I don't think I'm going to be able to film anything in the club, but hopefully I'll be able to get some footage that I can show of the actual mug in the park. I am bursting with excitement. This is like Christmas times 1,000. Cannot wait. It is June 5th, 2024, and look at this, the final finished mug. Last night was the launch party for the mug at Club 33. Oh, we are so happy with it. Whoa, you can tell I was a little excited about my costume and filming in Disneyland, and I kind of forgot to get a close-up shot of the mug. So before we wrap things up, let's take a look at the finished product. Oh, so good. It is incredible. The glaze turned out wonderfully. It matches the actual artifact in the park perfectly. I am in love with it. The plaque looks great. And then the bottom bonus, they did it in a beautiful ice cave blue. I could not be happier with the way the mug turned out. I want to thank again the incredible people at Tiki Farm for taking my sculpture and doing such an incredible job with it. And of course, the bonus feature is you can hang it on the wall from the hole here in the back. Yeah. Okay. Wanted to make sure you saw the finished piece before we wrap things up. Let's return to Disneyland. It is incredible. This is incredible. Wearing this in the park is incredible. We are never going to forget this. I want to thank you all for joining us on our Matterhorn mug adventure. And I want to give a special thanks to Club 33 and the amazing people with Disney for giving us this opportunity. Thank you all for watching. I'm going to put some other little videos here if you want to watch further sculpting videos. I will see you all on the next episode of Tiki Technical Tuesday.